join me in welcoming the moderator for the session, Ms. Luis Alicia Aguilar, Senior Project Manager, International Affairs, German Solar Association. Please welcome. It's over to you, Ms. Aguilar.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to moderate this session. My name is Luz Aguilar, and I'm the Senior Project Manager of the Solar German Association, partner organization of NSEFI. I'm very glad to welcome for the welcome remarks Mr. Dr. Nicole Glenneman, Deputy Head of Division. She will be giving the speak on, just let me go. I need the clicker. It's here, sorry. To inaugurate this session on agri-photovoltaics developments and potential, we have Mr. Dr. Nicole Glenneman, Deputy Head of the Division for Bilateral Energy Cooperation of the German and Federal Ministry for Economics and Climate Action. Unfortunately, her busy schedule has not allowed her to join us in presence today. However, she has kindly shared some welcoming words with us. So without further ado, Dr. Nicole Glenneman.
Government of Germany. I'm honored to inaugurate this special conference session on business opportunities for agri-photovoltaics in India at the REI Expo 22. Climate change, strained ecosystems, and a steadily growing world population require us to find innovative and sustainable solutions. Agri-photovoltaics certainly is a prime example for the kind of concepts we need to promote sustainable growth globally. By co-locating solar energy generation and crop cultivation, we can promote clean and renewable energy without sacrificing scarce land. Moreover, we can secure agricultural production from climate risks and save farmers' livelihoods. Our experts tell us that especially India has outstanding favorable conditions to develop agri-photovoltaics. Abundant sunshine and fertile soils could make India world-leading in the deployment of this innovative concept. The German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action and our partner ministry, the Ministry for New and Renewable Energy, are counting on your ideas and passion. Both governments decided to look deeper into this topic and the potential of AgriPV in Germany and India. In Germany, we first introduced special AgriPV premiums in large-scale PV tenders through so-called innovation tenders. Now, AgriPV becomes a fixed part of our Renewable Energy Sources Act, again with special premiums for different types of AgriPV. Recently, an expert group from the private sector has defined the first pre-norm as a blueprint for an international D-norm, which exactly defines the characteristics of vertical and horizontal AgriPV. This norm now is also available in English and may be also of high relevance for India. I'm also delighted that the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, has put this important topic on the working agenda. India may be a great beneficiary from this development. I'm convinced that AgriPV will play a vital role in the energy transition of India, and I wish you all the best for this journey. Thank you very much, and Pia Melinge.
So the second person giving the welcome remarks is David Wedepol, who is the Managing Director of International Affairs at the German Solar Association. He's a journalist by training, and he first came in touch with the solar industry while working for an American consultancy company before taking up his job as a director of communications and market at BSW in 2009, also serving as the organization's spokesperson. He now holds the position of Managing Director International Affairs and is responsible for the association's international activities. He will share with us his perspective on AgriPV as well as the role of BSW in promoting this application.
Thank you, Luz. I don't think there are any slides. So thank you, and it's still exciting to me to see people in 3D, because for the last 2.5 years we've been doing this in 2 dimensions. So I'm really happy about that, and I'm really happy to see our partners in person, some of whom I hadn't met in person before. So as organizations with NSFI, we've been working since 2015, but it's actually my first time in India, so please forgive me if I get overly excited. So here you are, speaking to Germans about solar. Did that ever strike you as a little odd? I mean, those of you from the industry here know that Germany started very early in their application, with 1990 allowing the feed-in tariff. And Subuji, I'm sorry, Germany still has more PV installed than India, even though we are a smaller country. So, and even this year, the race is on, but I think we will still come out on top. So both of our countries' goals are very ambitious. I hear that the Indian government proposes until 2030, 350 gigawatts. Germany wants to do 215. We have 64 currently. And while we are geographically very different, Germany isn't but an Indian state in population and size, we have found that when working together, we face some of the same challenges, particularly when scaling, because what we have to do is to massively scale, and that's an undertaking that I sometimes find, daunting, but I don't think there's an alternative. So what challenges do we face? We both have supply chain issues. We are seeing that the sheer amount of skilled labor we need to install and maintain these systems. Germany wants to move into more open field applications because most of our system, even most of our power is on the roof. India is going the other way, wants to move also to the rooftop. And the third one, and the one we're talking about here mostly, but they're all connected, is the scarcity of land. Now, at home, Germany is very densely populated, rather small, so usually if there's land, it's already put to use. And also, when it comes to agricultural land, to farming, that's a very emotional subject, growing food in our country. So to put panels there, to use it for something else than growing food, that can lead to a political fight. So I think combining the two, farming and making energy, is key to solving much of the issue of scaling that we have. And the good thing is, in Germany, farmers are more than 6 times more likely to own PV already, albeit on buildings, than the general population is. So we are seeing a meteoric rise in interest in AgriPV, even though the application lacks the ambition. We just heard of the tender incentives from the respective ministry. And we're here to exchange the best practices, both in the framework conditions, so we can actually move, and we're going to hear about the legality. We are also here to hear about the financing, because an investment in PV is always an upfront investment. And the practical application, those who actually already do it and what they have learned. So I really look forward to working with our partners, and I really look forward to our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And the next person giving the welcome remarks is Dr. Martin Lux. He first stepped into the field of climate and environment as a forester, completing his PhD on secondary forest and agroforestry systems. In 2020, after 2 decades of experience in climate mitigation and adaptation and natural resources management, he joined the KfW Development Bank office here in Delhi, India, as the head of the energy team. To share his perspective on employment of AgriPV in India and particularly address the question of financing and funding of AgriPV projects, please join me in welcoming Dr. Martin Lux.
Yes. Good afternoon to everybody. Also a warm welcome from my end. And yes, as a matter of fact, we all agree that AgriPV is an exciting endeavor, and it could be a substantial part for our way to come to a real energy transition, not only in India, but all over the world. Mathematics are quite simple normally, and you say 1 + 1 is 2. When it comes to AgriPV, it is more than 2. And I think that's really the intriguing difference that we see here. You made already reference to the land scarcity. You made reference to Germany. We have here exactly twice as much people living per square kilometer than in Germany. In Germany, we have 230, roundabout, and in India, we have 460, minus all these high mountains and deserts, and you name it. So, yes, land use conflicts are here even more visible than in any other country of the world, also in Germany. Still, when we look at the mere figures without looking at the social and political and economical small nitty-gritties, we can see that only with 1%, I think our friend Tobias Winter is always making reference to you, with only 1% of Indian agricultural land, we would be able to produce more than 600 gigawatt peak capacity in India. This is only a theoretical figure, but it gives you the idea what can be achieved there. No? On top, we have so quick and recent technology developments in the sector of how all the modules are developed, so you can be applied even more flexibly. You can develop various combinations between agro and PV, and if you do it well, you can also have very positive impact on water use and the use of agrochemicals. So there's really multiple benefit and not only a win-win, but a win-win-win-win-win situation if we do it properly. And now here's Martin Lux representing a development bank. We have to come to the downsides. There's many open questions, especially in a country like India, that need to be addressed. One will be also presented in one of the next sessions, the legal challenge, the land use classifications and all the regulatory trade-offs that are there is really like an impending, highly impending threat to all what we do. I think we have to face it, but it needs to be taken into account. Secondly, how to aggregate the production and how to ensure that the offtake by the distribution companies is well organized and is also well paid. No? Then we have mere infrastructure problems or challenges. Let's talk about challenges. We have to construct all the feeder lines in the agricultural and in the farming regions in order to get power to the farming land and also the other way around. And here we come. We have to coordinate between farmers and installers, and we have to come to agreements how all this organization is being set up, still taking into consideration this land use issues. No? You will have a change in produce, most certainly. There will be higher technology on a maybe traditionally low technologically managed land. All there will be also a gap in terms of how do we get to this higher technologies. No? All in all, we will have higher risk in production, in offtake, technology, in price developments that need to be taken into consideration. And we have to organize also not only the marketing of the power, but also the marketing of the produce, and have to see how all this is traditionally done and how this is now being done in more sophisticated ways, and how to do this at large scale in areas where you really produce electric power and agricultural produce at the same time. And that comes to the main topic that I would just like to summarize. What we have been seeing in many cases so far, we see there is some kind of PV plus agro. But in order to really face the challenge that we have, land use and trade-offs that we have to do it the other way around. We have to see how do we do agro plus PV. At the end, it needs to add up 1 + 1 is more than 2, but this is something that really needs to be developed and that really needs to be further looked at. Concluding, there is lots of opportunities that we can tap into. Scaling up and bankability with all the challenges that we have is still an issue, and we have to address it. We have ongoing national schemes that we could also use for it. I think you all are aware of this Kusum scheme, that we can use these opportunities. And last but not least, in order to really scale it up, we need a critical mass and some really bigger pilots, basically also on the state level, that help us to learn to really make this an alternative and a substantial contribution to the overall and worldwide energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we are going into the details of this topic, business opportunities for AgriPV in India. And for that, I would like to invite Mr. Pulipaka from NSFI. He's the youngest chief executive officer of the association, and yet when joining the NSFI as a CEO in 2018, he already carried with him a long list of accomplishments and immense experience in the renewable energy sector. As a businessman, as a researcher, and notably also through promoting the integration of youth and establishment of dialogue platforms. Today, he's one of the key advocates for agri-photovoltaics in India. In his role at the NSFI, has fundamentally contributed to expand the knowledge base, dissemination, and implementation of AgriPV. To provide us an overview of the recent developments and the latest AgriPV plans in India, I welcome to the podium Mr. Pulipaka.
Thank you very much, Luz. Welcome to India once again to David, Luz, and Sasha, and it's nice to see all of you once again. This is my 4th REI when I'm speaking on the same topic. In the first time when I spoke about AgriPV here 4 years back, the room was not even full in the first row. No one had a clue of what AgriPV was or what we were talking about. But to see a room this full and to also talk about AgriPV now gives us immense satisfaction that we have done our part in contribution. I have 10 minutes, but I won't take more than 5 minutes because these slides most of you have already seen. I will mostly take you through what happened in India so far, and the speakers next who will speak after me are the people who worked on ground, and it will be doing more good if you hear from them than me who just sat with the ministry. So as we speak today, these are the hot spots for AgriPV in India. You can see it's concentrated mostly on the western part and the southern part of the country. We came up with the first study before, if I go back. Yeah, so I think we are missing a slide here, but we commissioned India's first AgriPV study back in 2019. That study has become so popular, it has reached the Parliament of India. Honorable Agriculture Minister has referred to it, and since then directed the ministry to come up with a new policy on AgriPV. And as we speak, the policy is now in the final stages of becoming a draft policy, and after that becoming a policy for farmers as well as solar. Recently, with the support of leading law firms in India and Indo-German Energy Forum, we commissioned a second study which talks about the legal aspects of AgriPV. It's a very interesting topic, but I will leave it to Ms. Suruchi, who will take you through it in her slides. Understanding the importance of India in agriculture and solar, we have proposed to the IRENA Coalition for Action that there needs to be a joint working group for renewables in agriculture. So since 2022 January, the early this year, NSCFI is chairing a 38-member working committee on renewables in agriculture. Our first task was to meet all the energy and agriculture ministers in USA last year and sensitize them about who should be taking what role, because Mr. Martin Lux mentioned that we need to have a win-win-win-win-win situation. And he's right, there are 5 wins. There is government, there is academia, there is solar, there is agriculture, and there is community. All 5 of them should win at the end of the day. That's how we made this joint statement, which was well received by the UN Secretary General's office. India is not a country, it's a subcontinent. We have different land use patterns. We have different ways a land can be used. You cannot use one particular land for other purpose, and if you change it, then you can't switch back. So these are predominantly the main land use patterns in India. And we visited with the IGF team. We visited 14 solar plants. It took us 4.5 months to visit AgriPV plants in the country. And we have divided them broadly in these 3 types. One is below the panel you're doing AgriPV. You're doing AgriPV in the interspace farming, and you're doing AgriPV in the conventional way. So you can see me in the last scorching sun heat with my coat on the conventional AgriPV plant that was in the westernmost part of India near Jamnagar. Now, let me show you some photos that can give you the feel of how AgriPV in India is. This is the bird's eye view of a 1 megawatt plant. In fact, one of the best performing AgriPV plants in India. This photo was taken by me on the top of the substation, and they grew brinjals, eggplant, potatoes, leafy vegetables, turmeric, and the yield for potato was surprisingly better in this part of the country. This is an outlier. In fact, one of the best government R&D institution collaboration with the industry. If for someone who doesn't know here, the western part of our country in Rajasthan is very arid. They receive 1/10th of the average rainfall that our country gets. Every drop of water here is very important. So this plant was designed in such a way that you have the water and the rainwater harvesting also happens, and AgriPV takes on there. It's the same plant in Anand, and this is the actual AgriPV plant in Gujarat. And we also have in the Cochin airport. Yeah, this, when I was, before in my previous role when I was at NICE, we went and planted these beautiful colorful flowers which give you a good aesthetic sense in the plant. And this is a Jain irrigation plant where you can see the banana plants at solar panel which is installed at a good height. This is near Agra, closer to Delhi, near Taj Mahal. With the Indo-Norway support, this plant was installed. This is a research project again by Junagadh Agriculture University, and tomato plants were installed here. And this is India's, or rather sorry, the world's first airport that runs on 100% solar. And they are also the world's first airport who produce agriculture crops below the solar and make more money from the crops than solar in the last 2 years. This is the pumpkin that they sell. In fact, this is one of their best producing crops in that part of the country, which is in Kerala. This is again a bird's eye view of the first plant that you have seen. This was done in collaboration with Anand Agriculture University and the Gujarat Industry Power Corporation Limited. This is a second plant of them where they were only growing leafy vegetables. This was during the installation of the plant. There was manual tilt. You can tilt it in 3 different degrees. And this is the first AgriPV plant in our country, which was installed back in 2011, when India's solar capacity was less than a few megawatts. And this was the first experiment that attracted the government of Gujarat, who then went ahead and formulated a plan for AgriPV, and India's next 5 megawatt scale plants have come in Gujarat because of this plant. And finally, before I stop on the pictures, you know, in India, we are a very price sensitive market. Our solar margins are as thin as they can be. And AgriPV is something where you can look at from 2 fronts. You have an agriculture land and you co-locate solar on the agriculture land. Or why don't you co-locate on your solar land agriculture and increase the vegetation? So this is the last slide, that's why I always keep it, where this was an arid land, 0 crop produced in 75 years. You had solar and they cultivated lemongrass. And 1 liter of lemongrass oil is 1,000 rupees. So like I said, they made more money from selling the lemongrass oil than selling the power at 4 rupees 50 paisa. This is an interesting photo I wanted to show you, where there's a rooftop AgriPV, sort of a greenhouse plus water utilization, and they're growing good crops. I was told this company has done another 10 kilowatt. They will be here anytime soon. So, I mean, after Mr. Lux spoke, I don't think I should even touch about challenges, because he has already outlined all the 3 aspects that I was talking about. But I'll only stop here, and I hope I am on time. That stakeholder coordination is very important. If you ask me to install a solar plant, I need a PPA, I need land, and then I can go and install a plant. In India, we are installing 1 megawatt every hour. So it's not a big deal to install solar. But to do it on agriculture land or to do it with agriculture requires multi-stakeholder coordination. My team sat and made me a list. You need to talk to 19 people before you even plow the land for aggregate solar. That's the intensity of stakeholder coordination that's involved. We did some study. The book that all of you are referring is on the legal aspects of it. Now we are going to come up with another study with the help of our friends at Indo-German Energy Forum on how to simplify and streamline this. MNRE has formed a committee on AgriPV policy, and one of the few key suggestions that we are going to give, and the policy will be out before the month ends, is on streamlining this entire process. Because for solar we did it. There was a point of time where we required 35 signatures for 1 solar plant. Today it's only 2. 1 is your own signature. So that is something that we want to simplify in AgriPV. And the figure that is always quoted from our report of NSCF and IGF, that 1% of India's land under cultivation, if we have agriculture and solar co-located, we will have 634 gigawatt of solar. 634. That's twice our 2030 target, and that's almost 85% of our installed capacity by 2040. So the land use classification part will be again taken care in the legal part. The technical norms and standards is something that we are working on. Germany has standardized it, Italy has standardized it, Japan has standardized it, China has standardized it. So now we are number 5, so we should also standardize it. And we need to establish a process in which we know, okay, for AgriPV, these are the standards, this is the height, this is the structure, and this is how you should go ahead. And last but not the least, I want to end on a high note. After 6 years of active advocacy, we were able to convince the government that AgriPV is really the future of India's agrarian economy. Most part of our GDP doesn't come from agriculture, but a significant chunk comes, and agriculture sector feeds us. We had an objective of doubling our farmers' income, along with an objective of installing 350 gigawatt of solar. Why can't we do both of them together is the logic. So Government of India has accepted our request, and in 2019 they came up with this scheme where they said that if you have an agriculture land within 5 kilometer radius of the substation, you can install up to 2 megawatt of solar on your agriculture land. The tariff is determined by the state regulatory commissions. We have some problems there. I don't want to go into that. In the first report, we have analyzed it. But I think that is still something that we have to address it. And I got the cue that I am running out of time. So these are the upcoming projects. And we have forecasted that by the end of this year, we are going to have almost, and this figure for India is not a big figure, but we are going to touch 1 gigawatt of AgriPV. It's not big for us. We have 1 gigawatt for breakfast. But still, having 1 gigawatt for AgriPV by the end of this year is a very big deal for us. Here you can see almost 900 megawatt of that in pipeline. And here comes my famous figure, which I say, if you have 1% of the land, 673 gigawatt in dry lands and 895 gigawatt in arable land and 187 gigawatt in active irrigation land. This is only 1%. This is the potential of AgriPV in India. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward for next presentations. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Luz.
Thank you, Subbu. He mentioned also these studies. You can find on your table a barcode that you can scan and go directly to the website of AgriPVs where you can download all this information as well. I would like to present now Mr. Siddharth Goel. His expertise range across the fields of environment, energy, and sustainable transport, whereby his key focus lies with project management and policy analysis. Today, he's part of the energy program at the International Institute for Sustainable Development as a senior policy advisor, working amongst other things towards scaling up the integration of renewables in agriculture. So we have an expert here as well. To discuss policy requirements and the potential of scaling up agrophotovoltaics in India, please join me in welcoming Mr. Siddharth Goel.
Good afternoon, everyone. So it's always hard to follow Mr. Pulipika, but I'll try my best. So today I'll be covering what are some potential business cases for agrivoltaics in India. Firstly, for those of you who aren't familiar with IISD, or the International Institute for Sustainable Development, we are a research think tank. We work in supporting a lot of state as well as national governments in navigating the energy transition. So we've been working closely with a number of ministries in India. We also have a global team, so we have offices around the world. We're working closely with Indonesia on the G20, and we work on other areas like fossil fuel phase-outs, transition from fossil to clean energy, and just transitions. So in terms of our sort of focus on AgriPV, we've been part of a GIZ-supported research consortium that's been working to support state governments in the sustainable implementation of the PM Kusum scheme. We launched a guidebook which was focused on solar pumps, PM Kusum component B and C, late last year. And we're working currently on a new guidebook which will focus on solarizing agricultural feeders, component A and component C, which is due to be launched early next year. And really that's been our entry point into AgriPV. The PM Kusum scheme allows AgriPV, it creates a policy framework for it under component A. And in our consultations with a number of developers, we found that land is one of the key constraints in implementing the PM Kusum scheme. So AgriPV can actually play an important role in terms of being a solution for this challenge. So we are currently working on developing a white paper on AgriPV, which will be launched early next year. And today we'll be presenting some of the early findings from that white paper. So what we've done is, I think in the previous presentation, we covered what are some of the key pilot projects that are taking place across the country. So we've actually gone and spoken to a lot of the implementers of these pilot projects, agricultural universities, discoms, developers, to understand what has been their experience like in terms of implementing these projects and what lessons can be drawn for future projects. So what we found so far is that agrivoltaics in India are still in a sort of technology demonstration phase. A number of the pilot projects have focused on what kind of crops can be grown, what is the impact on yield, what is the cost economics. But really the next phase of projects need to focus on developing business models that can support the scale up of AgriPV in India. Secondly, India has a very unique and complex agroeconomic context. There are a few key staple crops like rice, wheat, sugarcane, where there's like large, widespread cultivation of these crops. A number of AgriPV pilots have focused on horticulture crops, medicinal crops. So really the standards and definitions of AgriPV that emerge need to take into account India's sort of diversity in agroeconomic context. And then thirdly, a number of pilot projects have employed very diverse technology and deployment designs. So the business models that really emerge need to build upon these technology models. So based on all of this, we found that there are largely two key stakeholders when it comes to implementing an AgriPV project. You have the developer of a solar power plant and you have the farmer. And to successfully implement the project, it's necessary to align the incentives of both the developers as well as the farmers. So when we spoke to a few developers, they said, their key incentive is that in areas where land is scarce or land rents are high, AgriPV can help them negotiate potentially a lower land rent because it allows cultivators to continue sort of agricultural production. Secondly, there are secondary benefits of AgriPV, given sort of the cool microenvironment created by crop production. So based on this, it could potentially lower panel temperatures and increase efficiency. However, there are costs involved. So there is a higher capital cost associated with putting solar panels on stilts. It could also lead to potentially a decline in power generation due to some of the design modifications. From the farmer's perspective, the main advantages are it could incur additional income through land rent, and then services like shading could enable the production of different kinds of crops, more higher value crops, and increase productivity for certain kinds of crops. But again, from a cost perspective, it could have an impact on their yield, particularly a decline in the area available for cultivation. So based on all these three factors, the incentives and costs, we've come up with three broad business models that can be considered. The first is an equal partnership between the farmer and the developer. The second is a system which is wholly owned and operated by one entity, so either a farmer that becomes a solar entrepreneur or a developer that gets into agriculture. And the third is a developer acting as the primary promoter and the farmer as a secondary partner. So I'll quickly touch upon each of these models. So under the equal partnership model, a developer enters into an agreement with a farmer, which allows the developer to build and operate a solar plant, whereas the farmer continues crop cultivation. So in terms of areas where this can be sort of implemented, there's a lot of potential in peri-urban areas or areas that are relatively close to cities and towns, where there's a clear market for high-value crops. Again, areas which currently there are poly houses and precision farming can be practiced are also potentially suitable areas for this model. In terms of what's required, so farmers need to be willing to undertake sort of high-value crop production. Developers need to be willing to experiment with different deployment models. So given that agricultural productivity will be one of the key considerations for this business model, developers will need to be quite flexible in terms of the design structures. So they need to take into account the optimal sunlight that's available, the viability of enough airflow to allow production. The main risk involved with this is really the potential for conflict, given that there might be competition for resources. The second major model is a single entity model, and this has really been tried in many countries around the world. Again, in terms of areas, areas that are close to markets for high value crops are relatively quite suitable for this model. Given that there's total revenue and land use productivity is the key consideration for this model. So this allows a lot of flexibility in terms of the types of crops that can be grown, the kind of practices that can be undertaken like pisciculture, livestock. However, given that, again, revenue generation is the key focus of this, it could lead, a risk is that agriculture might lose out in terms of priority. And then finally, the third model is a farmer being a secondary partner. So the developer allows farmers to sort of cultivate certain crops under the solar panels. Again, there's a high potential for this in certain arid and semi-arid regions across the country, where it can open up a lot of possibilities in terms of the kinds of crops that can be grown in shading. Again, from the developer side, there needs to be a willingness to accommodate certain design modifications, which can allow the farmers to sort of cultivate land. Given that revenue generation is going to be the key consideration for this from a power generation standpoint, just some minor changes in the design sort of structures can open up a lot of possibilities. The main risks for this model are certain safety risks for farmers, given the potential of underground and overhead cabling, some security risks potentially for developers, given that they'll have to open up access to the solar plants for farmers. Broadly, these are the three models that we've sort of identified, which can help scale up agrivoltaics. There are also certain policy measures, some recommendations that different developers have shared with us in terms of scaling up agrivoltaics. So the first is the need for India to consider developing definitions and standards which can create a framework for agrivoltaics in India. In many countries, there are these definitions that have standards where they clearly define that agriculture is the primary use and power generation will be the secondary use. But I think for India's context, there can be sort of more flexibility in terms of deployment models and business models. So states can consider definitions which allow that flexibility to be undertaken. The second is financing mechanisms to improve the competitiveness of agrivoltaics. So typically in the PM Kusum scheme, there's a single ceiling tariff that's implemented across the state. But that necessarily wouldn't sort of differentiate between an AgriPV plant, which is in a peri-urban area, and a solar plant, which is located in a remote area. So some sort of innovative financing mechanisms can help overcome this. Some developers have also suggested going through the open access route to scale up agrivoltaics. And then the third important aspect is capacity building, so skilling, both for the developers and the farmers in terms of modeling the agrivoltaic design, and for farmers to sort of understand what kind of crops can be grown in shading. So again, given that number of agricultural universities have implemented these projects, there's a potential for setting up centers of excellence or short courses for both developers and farmers to scale up agrivoltaics. With that, I'd like to end the presentation and pass it on to you.
Thank you very much. We are running out a little bit of time, so I would like you to ask you to keep on time for the last three presentations. I would like to welcome Mr. Vivek Saraf. In 2020, he's co-founded a startup Sunseed APV, won first runner-up in the first editions of India's Enel Green Power Innovation Challenge. So I will then welcome you. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction, Luz. So I'm Vivek Saraf, founder of Sunseed APV. So before we talk about the economics of agrivoltaics in India, I'd just like to quickly talk about why APV. So like in Europe, the driver for APV has been the lack of available land, right? So they need to do APV if they do ground mount. But in India, there is enough land available for utility scale projects. However, if you want to do distributed solar, then agrivoltaics is a pretty good option. But I would say the main driver in India that should be for agrivoltaics is to increase the productivity of agriculture. APV can address some of the main causes of farm distress in India, which is small land sizes, high temperatures, and water stress. So in the next few slides, we'll see how a symbiotic relationship between farmers and solar project developers can result in increased incomes for both. Now, we believe to make agrivoltaics commercially viable and bankable, you need a scientific six-pronged approach to design such projects. You need, because you have high cost of elevated structures, so you need lightweight structures. You need to identify and play on the synergies between solar and agriculture, the 1+1 thing that Martin spoke about. And then, because you're changing the light and microclimate environment, you need to simulate that, you need to understand that so that you can create agriculture models that are adapted to it. And then, obviously, a good water management strategy is required in India. So keeping that in mind, we've created what we call a APV shade house, which integrates solar power generation with protected cultivation. And that has a lot of benefits, especially on the synergies side, because you're not only having dual use of land here, but a dual use of the structure and the three-dimensional space below that structure, below the panel height. This can result in higher crop yields. So it's kind of proven, economics of protected cultivation is fairly established, and you can get 2.5 to 3 times the yield as in open field agriculture. And then all the climate resilience that protected cultivation brings to it as well. Now, another very important aspect is the potential increase in the solar generation. So thanks to bifacial panels, you can have a much higher bifacial gain in APV because you have higher distances between rows, you have much higher elevation, and then you can have surfaces in agriculture like the shade net or mulches that have much higher albedo, so the net albedo of the whole system can be increased significantly. Now, it's important to have the proper technology platform to design the projects correctly and to create bankable flows. So what we're essentially doing is creating a digital twin with real-world characteristics and then running ray tracing and energy balance algorithms on it to create a temperature and light profile, which then goes into a photosynthesis simulation which will give you the crop yield. So you have like a demonstrated crop yield on paper, surely. And then also on the PV side, because right now, PV-sys that everyone uses, it uses view factor, which does not really, calculate bifacial gains accurately. So you need ray tracing to do right bifacial gains, and this would enable that to happen. And once you have these results from these simulations, then you can integrate that with real-time data from IoT-based sensors, create machine learning algorithms to get a farm controller, which would then determine the movement of your single-axis tracker, movement of your shade nets, the automated retraction of it, and automated irrigation. This is just a plot of, the light simulation under APV in different conditions. So the first one on the left is you see, non-homogeneous distribution with a fixed tilt, and on the right side you see a homogeneous distribution with a tracker. Now coming to the economics. So what we did was we used 4 different APV designs with different heights, different agriculture strategies, and compared that, the economics with that of a ground mount. So here we're comparing a normal fixed tilt ground mount with a bifacial ground mount, which has a higher elevation of 1.25 meter, a bifacial ground mount tracker, which has an elevation of 1.75 meters, and then 2 3.75 meter elevated systems with protected cultivation integrated, one with one with tracking and one with a fixed tilt. So as you can see, the costs would increase based on how the system is. So the additional cost of a ground mount, normal ground mount, is 0, and then based on that you have all these other systems, and with the increase. So you can see that the main increase is from the mounting structure, then you have the additional cost of land, the cost of the bifacial panels, the cost of the agriculture infrastructure, and then the engineering. Now you take a look at the revenue side of these. So there are 2 main things to look at. One is the per acre income from agriculture, which would differ in different projects. So if you're doing like a bifacial ground mount with 1.25 meter elevation, you can expect to make about 50,000 rupees per acre per year. And similarly, now going to elevated structures with protected cultivation, you can go as high as 2.5 lakhs. And these are fairly established economics. It's not something that we're really, new that we're counting on. And on the bifacial gains, again, you have like 5% bifacial gain typical for the ground mount, but then for an elevated and with different materials for the agriculture, you can increase that as well. So that translates, now if we look at the profitability, then that can translate. So if I take a 10% equity IRR for a normal ground mount, and that would get you a LCOE of 3.75, so 3 rupees 75 paisa. Now if I keep that same 3.75 and then I go to do APV projects, then for different APV designs that we're talking about, you'll get higher equity IRRs going as high as 3.5 to 4% additional equity IRR for a elevated tracker. And so that's significant if we can make that possible. And then similarly, the red line shows the decreasing LCOE if we keep the equity IRR as a constant. So net, that can translate, if we have the right partnership between a developer and the farmer, then both can benefit. And so just in interest of time, I'll skip that, but both, you can have 3 to 4% extra IRR for the developer and almost a doubling of income for the farmer, and most importantly, reducing the risk. So right now he's prone to all risk. With the risk going to the developer, you can have more assured incomes for the farmer. And yeah, I'll kind of end here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I would like to welcome Mrs. Suruchi Kotoki, who wrote the legal part of this last study that was published about the legal aspects of AgriPVs in India. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank IGF for making me part of this esteemed panel. It's my complete treat to hear these eminent speakers out here. And, well, I hope to throw some light today on the legal aspects of agri-photovoltaics in India. I'm sure as soon as you hear the word legal, you will start yawning or you'll think it to be complicated, but I hope to make this more simpler and understandable. So before I start, let's look at some interesting numbers. So India is second largest market in Asia and third globally when it comes to new solar PV capacity. Then India ranks fourth in total solar energy installation globally, surpassing for the very first time Germany, our dear Germany, in 2021. We currently have a target of 175 gigawatt, out of which 100 is from solar. We have already met half of this in July 2022. Further, our current updated NDC is to reduce emission intensity of GDP by 45% by 2030. For those of you who don't know what NDC is, NDC stands for Nationally Determined Contribution, which simply put our climate action target set by respective countries under the Paris Agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, with all these ambitious targets, we all know that the major roadblock is that land is limited and availability is a big concern for RE projects, including solar. In fact, for solar, you require, for 1 megawatt solar project, you require double the land than for a 1 megawatt wind energy project. Hence, there is a need to reduce the existing land demand. This is where I feel AgriPV comes to rescue, because it seeks to harmonize two major sectors in India, which is agriculture and power. Now, since 60% of land is under farming in India, and we have 300 days of sunshine, there cannot be a better alternative than AgriPV projects. And I think we have a very great prospect to become a global leader in this field. Now, coming to the law. Unfortunately, as on date, we do not have a specific law or policy regulating AgriPV projects in India. Hence, in the absence of express legislations, we will be guided by the solar policies which are formulated by respective state governments from time to time, and of course, the provisions of the Electricity Act. So approvals which are typically required for solar projects will become applicable for AgriPV projects as well. Now, there are definitely encouraging steps which are being initiated. For example, recently IIT Delhi came up with a solar panel which has high efficiency, shadowless, and auto-rotating solar tower system. Then the recently introduced Maharashtra Renewable Energy Policy also talks about solar panel by self-help groups and farmers associations, where solar panels can be installed 4 meters above the ground. Now again, the procedure will be yet to be implemented, and it will be implemented by the Department of Energy. There's also talks about single window clearance system for all the renewable energy projects in Maharashtra, which will again automatically become applicable for AgriPV projects also. This again will go a very long way in reducing administrative bottlenecks. We also, I will not deal with this, we also have Kusum A scheme, which is again a very welcoming scheme. And they have been trying to reduce all the bottlenecks. For example, they relaxed the requirements of bank guarantee, which was erstwhile there, to help the farmers. Now, when it comes to land legislations governing change of land use, when you convert agricultural land to non-agricultural land for solar projects, you are required to intimate the Tehsildar and the collector in the state of Maharashtra, while in the case of Karnataka, it is considered as a deemed approval. Also, collector permission is required if you divert non-agricultural land to any other non-agricultural land purpose, or from agriculture to any other non-agriculture purpose, failing which, of course, there would be penalty. Having said so, currently the legislations are silent on mixed use of land, that is continuation of solar activities as well as agriculture. But it is our personal view that since agriculture activity continues to be operational on the AgriPV project, the land use is not changed, and only an additional activity, which is the solar project, is being conducted. So we do not think that a conversion fee will be payable. We also discussed this with the nodal authorities in Maharashtra and Karnataka, which is MEDA and CREDL. Although they haven't provided any clarifications, they have suggested that such coexistence should not pose a problem. But as a lawyer, I would always suggest my client that before you undertake any activities, you should always, notify and, seek clarifications from the respective bodies to avoid any risk or liability. Now, what are the potential barriers? Firstly, there may be different views regarding legal implementation of AgriPV projects. As we know, there's no specific laws in this. Secondly, most conventional crops require full sunlight. Again, this is another hindrance. Thirdly, project cost may be an issue because of increased height of the solar panel, maintenance cost, and cleaning, etc. We very well know robotic cleaning, like what Ecopia does, is not a very cheap solution. So all cost considerations have to be kept in mind. Then, animal grazing may also be a safety concern due to risk of electrocution. Most importantly, like in Germany, in India also land holds sentimental values to the farmers. Farmers are the deal breaker or the deal maker in this situation. And considering the literacy rates and farmer suicide which goes on in Maharashtra also, we need to keep these in mind while thinking, and we have to educate them. Further, technical feasibility of module cleaning, availability of groundwater, which is a big concern in most of the states in India, and elevation of solar panel has to be researched and tested. This is my last slide. I'll quick up. Yeah. Sure. What are the proposed next steps according to us? Firstly, there has to be AgriPV specific laws in place without which you are exposed to unknown risks and liability. Secondly, we need to have a single window clearance systems because here farmers play a very important role. So to make it easier and less cumbersome, this has to be in place. Thirdly, there needs to be extensive awareness. As I said, farmers are the deal breakers or deal makers here, so they definitely need a lot of convincing. Fourthly, there needs to be a prefixed progressive tariff. For example, the Kusum scheme offered only 3.14 feed-in tariff. This made the project completely unbankable, and banks were reluctant to finance these farmers due to poor financial viability. Then, land legislations have to specifically recognize the mixed use of land, which will again make it more clearer and reduce complications. Most importantly, these have to be supplemented by fiscal incentives, government schemes, exemptions, etc. Otherwise, farmers will never show interest. In fact, farmers are not able to get funding primarily due to two reasons. One, because banks know the track record of DISCOM not paying, and secondly, because banks cannot seize agricultural land when there is a default, hence bank insists for additional terms like rollover of more loans and interest and right on lease rents, etc. Seventh point, which I think is that if there is a mandatory purchase obligation, which is imposed on industry bodies to purchase certain amount of power, this will definitely go a very long way. Lastly, I understand MNR is already working on a policy, and this is going to give a huge impetus. Thank you very much. I finished well before time. Yes.
Thank you very much. We have our last speaker, Mr. Sasha Krause-Tunka, who is Next to Sun, who is a forefronter in Europe, and also they have a special vertical technique who is going to talk about.
Yes, thanks a lot for your patience. I think we are a little bit behind the schedule, so I will try to move fast through the slides and give you some impressions. Here you can see what we, what from our approach of AgriPV is. I think it's quite simple. We will do vertical installation simply to leave a lot of space left for agricultural use. I think the simple approach is that agriculture needs enough water, enough light, and the possibility to really work between the rows or to really work on the crops. And what we see here is that the vertical installation needs nearly no space, and also doesn't cover the crops and allow also the use of quite heavy machinery, in this case with more than 9 meters wide. So, okay, maybe I was a little bit fast. Yeah, okay. So I think one important question is, what is AgriPV? And we see these approaches right here. I think the one with the high elevated system is quite well known. This is a double use of the same ground in 2 levels. And our approach is to use it in 2 dimensions. Yeah? So we only use the horizontal for agriculture. It's left completely for agriculture. And only the vertical is used for the PV. And that's the reason why we lose less than 1% of the ground for the PV installation. The third, what we see over there, is also sometimes called AgriPV. I would not. This is a question we need to answer, and especially the regulator need to answer where the changes are. So I will go ahead. I think this one I already told you. I will only want to show you some slides, since we already have productive plants. So I think pictures say a little bit more than words. This is one of our first plants with 4 megawatt in Germany and hay production. Some impressions. I think especially the right-hand side shows that it works. But we can also do many different other crops. This, for example, was peas. This was also in the same field. We have some rows for real agricultural use, and that's what we see here. With a huge harvester, it works quite well, and also the crops grow well. This is a plant in France, and here we have some wheat. And I think, look at the picture and tell me if it works or not. Another one, this is with lentils, also in France. This one is potato cultivation in Austria with our system. This is quite new. This is in Japan. To be honest, I don't know which crops we are installed there, but I think it's to be seen how it works. This is a second approach with livestock farming, where we use a vertical system simply as a fence. Since if it's vertical, you can also use it for fencing, and in this case for cows. It's the same we have in Austria, for example, for chicken farms. That works as well. This is so now we have seen some impressions from the agricultural part. I now want to show you some impressions from the electrical part, and this is an interesting paper from 2013 already, which analyzed the comparison of vertical versus fixed tilted south, and shows that in many regions in the world, these are the darker ones, the vertical system, east-west, outperforms the fixed tilt south system. Especially, these are the darker parts in this graph. And that's exactly what we see from our data. So in the dark ones, we have an outperformance, in the gray ones, not. And that's exactly what we see from our data from Germany. I think there's also, I know that there is also a test plant in India with, at a university. I'm not sure if it is Jodhpur or so, which delivers so-so results. And this for me clearly says it's not, it doesn't say that vertical PV doesn't work, but it says that engineering matters. With vertical PV, it's very, you work a lot with very steep angles from where the sun comes to the modules. And it's very sensitive to engineering and really to get the full potential out of it. with not the right modules, not the right cells, not with shading from kinds of the or parts of the racking system, you easily lose 20-25% or even more. And so this is our technology where we are working on since 2015, and so that we are able to deliver the results we see from this study. And we are quite happy that we now also, our technology is available right now in India as well with our partner Wattkraft. Mr. Ganayam Yoshi is our responsible partner, and whoever is interested in this technology is invited to talk to him and to get more information. This is a final part on this topic is the energy production. This is also a very important topic, I think. Especially from Germany, we have a lot of data on it, and what we see is that the market reacts to the PV supply. Yeah? In Germany, we have 60 gigawatt installed, and what we see is they produce more completely at noon, and the market reacts with prices going down at noon. That's every day we see this in Germany in the summertime when PV is producing. And what we see with this system is east-west orientation. We produce in the morning and in the evening hours, and we can produce when the electricity is needed and when the prices are high. And on the other side, at noon, we have a quite low production, which comes from having the sun directly in the south. We have no direct irradiation, only indirect irradiation, which leads to 20-25% of the peak production. And this is not a bug, this is a feature, since especially if we're talking about the grid access, the grid capacity needed. We are, with this system, we can supply the electricity when it's